Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and welcome to part 16 of the Employee Manager, where we're going to go over employee and payroll review in this part 2 of the payroll. Well, I've got a lot to show you. In fact, we're going to go over how to edit the time clock right from the payroll screen, as well as the ability to review individual and click Save and Next. We have also automated our amounts and year-to-dates for deductions, additions, and as well as employee leave. So we've got a lot to show you, so let's get started. Okay, welcome back. We've got a lot to cover today, as well as last time when we did in review under the number 15, we did payroll review, and the details here in which we showed you how we can select multiple employees and move them over. And today we're going to go on that second step. And the second step in this is the ability to then review. Once we move these employees over to this, we're then going to be able to review each individual employee on the list, and that would include all of their payroll and time clock period detail here based on the start and end dates. We also have taxes, whether they're information based on the taxes that were set up in the employee information, as well as we have other deductions here. And as far as we've got the year to dates now working there, and that's for all the previous payroll, as well as other payroll additions and paid leave, which hopefully we'll get that today. We've got a lot of features to show you. Back on the payroll details, there's a few things that we did add in here. I did add in the working 20 days in the pay period, and that's based on a formula, and we're going to show that to you. So that's going to automatically adjust how many days in the pay period there are, and that would be based on the weekends and based on the holidays. So if we were to change the date here, that date's going to automatically change. We also have the hourly employees, how many hourly and how many salary, and that's based on an index here, in which these simply a count based on a hidden column, and we can either hide this column or use formatting to hide this count, which right now it's just a light blue, but you will probably hide this column or just change the font color so that you don't see this. But I wanted you to see it so that you can see how we got that. So we're going to show you that as well. And then of course we have how many employees were selected to pay here, and that's just a simple sum between hourly and salary employees above. All right, so let's get started. Let's take a look at this before we move on. We've got working days in a pay period. I want to know how many working days are in a pay period. And there's three different factors that factor into this, or two different, I should say. And those are based on the weekends, and there could be 2 weekends or dates, and that's also could be holidays. Now those are set up in the admin. Now let's take a look. Back into the admin, we have in the company information, we have days, work days off. We have off days and work days. And based on these days here, we can determine which days of the week are off. And we also have a work day here. And so these are related. So basically, this is a simple formula that when we change this formula here, you can see that if it's work day, then we're going to the row minus 24. And that just pulls up the day of the week. So in other words, this would be Monday. This will show 2 if it's a work day, otherwise it won't. This will show 3 if it's a work day, otherwise it won't. And so on and so forth all the way to 7. And this really helps us in our formulas because we've now numbered the dates based on the day. And if they're not working, they're blank. So that's really, really helpful. And then what I want to do is I'm going to use a formula called Count International, which is going to be really, really helpful. And that's going to determine how many, and we use that formula in the payroll screen, but we're going to use this number. And if you look real closely, if we have Tuesday and Wednesday off in the formula Count International, let's just take a look at that formula. I wanted to show you something here. Equals network, I should call it Network Days International. Sorry about that. Network Days International. And we have the start date and we have the end date, right? And then we have something called, let's pull this up. Okay, this is what I want you to, so we have the start date and the end date. That's important. Right, so to get the network days, we need this. We have those on the payroll, so we're going to use the start date and the end date on the payroll. Then we have something called weekends and holidays. And this is what I want you to focus on here. If Saturday and Sunday are weekends, we need to put this as 1. If Sunday and Monday are 2, if Monday and Tuesday are the off days, then it's 3. So based on the off days, or if it's just one day, we need to use these numbers. These are the numbers I'm looking for, okay? So, for example, if you look down here, it's 4, right? And right now our number's 4 because we have Tuesday and Wednesday off. Tuesday and Wednesday off. You see here, 4, Tuesday and Wednesday. So that's what I need to get. I need to get this number from a formula based on the days off, because we're going to be using network days inside the payroll screen. Network days, international, and the difference is equals network days. Now, if you just look at the network days here, you'll see we have the start and end date and we have holidays, but we don't have the ability to customize the weekends, right? But with Network Days International, we do have the ability. We've got this one additional feature, weekend, and that's what we're going to use because we have variable weekends. So we need to count the work days based on a variable weekend, and holidays is pretty simple. We'll go over that in a moment. So that's what I've used. So remember, this 4 is critical, and I've given this a name, Rich, called weekend days because I need that. So when we go back into the payroll screen, I'll show you that formula in just a second, but when we go back into the payroll screen and we look at this formula, we see we have those 4 components of this formula. We have the payroll start date. Of course, that's based right here on the from. We have, let's move this up, we don't need that. We have the payroll end date. Of course, that's based on J8, and those are also named ranges. We have the weekend days. Now, remember, I just showed you this named range in the admin screen. Right now, it's 4, and then we have the holiday dates. The holiday dates is the named range. So when we use this in formula, look, we've got named range, named range, named range, named range. That makes it so easy to look at. We're using 4 named ranges, and all we need to do is determine what is in those named ranges, and then we can figure out our formula. So the hardest part, of course, payroll start date's just based on the start date, end date just based on the end date. Weekend days is based on that number 1, 2, 3, 4 that I just showed you, and holiday dates. So let's go over the last 2 components once again, weekend days and holiday dates, to get that. So back into the admin screen, and we'll see this named range, weekend days. That's B25. We've named it weekend days. So whatever appears here, and this is a little bit larger of a formula, and basically what I want to do is we're going to count the number of work. I want to count the blank numbers. If it's equal to 1, right, we're going to count the blank in this range right here. You see this range? That's called work day numbers. I've named that range. So I want to count the blank. If it's 1, then do something. If it's 2, do something else. Why do we need to know how many blank days? Because in our workday count, right, in our workdays international here, when we go to weekend, if you look here, we have different numbers. When we have one day, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, when we have one day only, it starts with 11 to 17. 11 to 17 when we have one day off. So I need to know, is there 2 days off or is there 1 day off? So we can differentiate. So we're starting out with just 1 day off. If it's 1 day off and that day is Sunday, then mark it 11. If we have 1 day off and that day off is Monday, mark it as 12. Okay, so we've got that right there. So we need to know. So count the blank, count those workday numbers. If it's 1, then what I want to do is I want to match the blank. I'm looking for the blank. Where is the blank? And if the workday numbers, I'm going to match it in the workday numbers. If it equals 7, then 11. Let's look at that. I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to mark this as workdays. I'm going to workday. And I'm going to mark Sunday. Sunday is off day, right? So in this scenario, we have 1 day off and that day is Sunday. Okay, so let's go ahead and show that to you. Equals workday international. I'm going to comment out, and we're looking for 1 day off, and if that day is Sunday, 11 is the number we need. If it's Sunday, I need 11. If it's Monday, I need 12. So we're going to focus on that 1 day off. So let's go ahead and pull that up. If here's our formula. If it's 1, right, and if the match, if we're looking for the blank, and we find that blank in 7th position, which is where it is now on A31 down here, that's our blank position, then return 11. But what if it's not? If it's not, then match the blank and then plus 11. plus 11. Why is that? Well, let's say, okay, so we know if it's 7, we need to return 11, right? But what if the off day is 1? Let's mark that. If the off day is Monday, what should it be? Equals, let's look at that again. Workday International, comma, comma. If the workday is Monday, what should it be? It should be 12. 12, right? So that's what we need. We need 12. We need to pull 12. Sunday's 11. We got that covered. But Monday's 12. Tuesday's 13. So basically, it's Monday. So what is Monday? So how do we get 12 out of that? 12, how do we get 12 out of it? It's going to be the first. If it's Monday, it's going to be number 1, right? This is going to return 1. Why 1? Because it's going to be the first match, right? The first possible space that we found that match is Monday. So it's going to return 1. If we add 11, it's 12. If we add the next day, it's 13. So this is how we get either the last day, Sunday as 11, or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday would be the current location. Tuesday would be 12. Wednesday would be 13. So all we need to do is find it and match. So for example, this is position number 1. If this is the blank, it's this 1 plus 11. If this is the blank position, then it's 2 plus 11, which is 13. So that's basically how we get that. So you see, if we take this off, workday, and we say Tuesday's our off day, now it returns 13, which is that's the number we want to get. Okay, so we've covered for 1 day off, but what if it's 2 days off? If it's 2 days off, we have a different formula. Let's say we've got Tuesday and Wednesday off. What do we need? Tuesday and Wednesday equals Workday International. Right here, comma, comma, let's get that. So if it's 2 days off, right, if we have Tuesday and Wednesday off, we need to get 4. 4 is the one we're looking for. So how do we get 4 if it's Tuesday and Wednesday off? Well, let's look back in our formula and see how we get that. Okay, so we've covered if it's 1, but now what if it's 2? If count blank workday number equals 2, right here, 2, what do we do from this point on? Well, then we can do a sum. We can basically sum A30 through A31. What is that? That is all, if it equals 0, that would be, if the sum of A30, that would be Saturday and Sunday, then it's 1. Otherwise, return the sum of all of them equal to 0, then 2, if it's 2, right? Otherwise, match the workday. So this is a little formula that I've created that we're going to say if the last two return 1, if 25 and 31, if the sum of 25 and 31, that would be Sunday and Monday, that would be Monday and Sunday, then 2. So these are 2 specific incidents. Well, this one is Saturday and Sunday, A30, A31. If the total of those is 0, then that means Saturday and Sunday are off, right? Then we want to return 1. But what if it is Monday and Sunday? Monday and Sunday would be 25 and 31. If both of those equal 0, then return 2. So those 2 instances aside, for the other scenarios, we can assign a formula. And all we need to do is match the blank and then add 2, matching the blank just as we did up there, and then add 2, and that will get us the correct number for when there's 2 days off. That's how it works. And you can go through this formula. Please download the workbook using the links in the description below and see for yourself. You can walk through this. In fact, if you want to see really how this works, you can just click on the evaluate formula and bring it over here and then evaluate. Just go step by step through it so you can look at that and you can do different scenarios to see how that number works. And once we have this number here, we can then plug it into our main formula. Okay, so now we got that. Now we got the weekends. But what about the holidays? Well, if you take a look at this range here and you go all the way down to the bottom, you'll see that this named range is called holiday dates. So all we need to do is find a date. If there's a date within this range, then we're going to count it. If there's a date within this range, count it. So for example, let's go back into our payroll here. Take a look at our payroll, and we'll see that it's 14 working days in the pay period from November 1st to November 20th. But what if we add one more holiday? Let's do that and see how that works. If we go back into the admin, and we add within that pay period, so test holiday, and we add a November 15th onto that, we're going to see that now it's going to be one less in the payroll screen. So we go back into the payroll and we see now it's 13. So it's counted that day. So it excludes holidays and weekends using that formula. The payroll start, payroll end, plus the weekend days. We went over this complex formula, and simply locating a date within the holiday dates range. That's how that works, so that's great. So I just wanted to show that to you. Next up, we have hourly employees selected. We need to know how many hourly employees selected. And basically all that is we're counting the number of hourly employees from this range all the way until 310, all the way until, let's go ahead, I think it's, 3011 through 0310. We're going to count the number of salaries or count the number of hourly in that column. And to get this number, all we're going to be doing is indexing we're going to index the employee pay type. We need to know the pay type, and the pay type's a named range. Let's take a look at that under the formulas and under the name manager. We look down under employee and we'll look at employee pay type. So here under employee, we have so many employee pay type right here, and we tab over to that and we can see that that's a dynamic range using offset, and it's going to include all of the employee pay types here. So that's going to include, and I've added some data here so I can separate that. So it's going to include those pay types, hourly or salary. All right, so now we know, so we're going to index that, and we're going to use the match. All we need to do is get the row. How do we find the row? Well, we have the employee ID here. So all we need to do is run the match. You know I love to use index match. So we're going to use match. We're going to match M12. Of course, that is going to be a variable range. All right, it's not going to be absolute because we want it to use for every row in this column. And we want to match, of course, we could put the $sign here, but it doesn't matter because we're only using it within one column. And so we want to match that employee ID, and we're going to find it right here within this range, the employee ID range, and we want an exact match, so it's going to be 0. And then, of course, it's just column 1. It's one column. We're indexing one single column. Pay type is one column, so we just need to return the results from that single column. If, of course, there is an error, if it's blank for any reason, we want it to return blank. This way, when it's blank or there's nothing here, we just get a blank space here. So that's how we return both hourly and salary, and that's how we count them, so that we can have an accurate amount based on the number. And of course, if we add a few employees, it automatically updates. When we click add, it's going to automatically update that, just like that. All right, great. I'm glad we got that covered. Let's move on to the payroll, and that would be the second step, which is called the review employees. And we can click there just to review, and we can see where we are at in the screen. The basic idea of this is I want to create a list of employees that to be paid. And what I want to do is I want to go over each one of these employees. I want to review the hours worked. I want to review their taxes. I want to be able to review their deductions, other payroll deductions, other payroll additions, and employee paid leave, if any. And I want to review all of that. Let's move this up. We don't need this taking up the screen. I want to review all of that, and then once everything is okay, I want to move along. But I also want the ability to make changes if needed, especially in the schedule. For example, if we're missing a clock in break here, I want to fix that, and I don't want to. I want to fix it very easily. I don't want to have to go to other screens, and I just want to fix it very quickly. So I want to be able to go in and perhaps click on the schedule. When you've seen this edit time clock, we use this in the schedule, and we can also use it in our payroll too to edit payroll. So it's very easy. I'm going to show you just how we did that. So here we can easily add in a break-in time, just by using our handy pop-up to edit the time clock and clicking OK, and we can easily simply just use that and refresh it. So I want to show you how we did that. And so that's an important part of reviewing, is to be able to make changes to the time clock very easily using this edit icon, and this icon appears on any row that we select as long as there's data. If there's no data, it's not going to appear. If there is data, it will appear. And you've seen me use this before, and I will continue to use it in the future. It's a great feature, user-friendly, and it's a great way to quickly edit records without having to go into the original record, but it's automatically refreshed. And of course, when we do make those changes, this list gets automatically refreshed. So I'm going to show you how we did that. So once we move on, like if in this case there's no we don't have any time clock. There's one with some time clock data. But basically, if there would normally be lots of time clock data if you have employees, or if they're an hourly or salary sometimes. And then what I want to do is I want to take a look at this and then click next, save and next, and I want to put a green check mark there, and I want to track this particular information for each, and I want to know how many employees using this. I want to know how many employees we've completed and how many more left and what percentage were left. We can use this 2D bar chart, which I'll show you, to show you just how we did that. And this particular item will show you that. And so there's a few things I want to show you. Let's get into bringing the data over into here. So we didn't cover that last time, so let's cover that this time. So we're going to go into the developers. If you don't have this tab available, make sure you select it in the options and click the developers tab in the toolbar. Also, Alt F11 will get you there. We're going to go into the Visual Basic here. And we've got several payroll modules, and this is going to grow as we develop and build out our payroll system. We've got Save Employee, we've got Review Employee, we've got Select Sections, which we went over. We went over this last time. This particular allows us to select different sections. And then we're going to have Payroll Details to remove. And this is what I want, Payroll Details to review, and this is what I wanted to focus on. And then what this does is this particular macro has been assigned to the button that we saw in the first section, which is step 2, employees to pay. So if we right click this button, click assign macro, we will see that the macro that's been assigned is called payroll details to review. And the basic idea of this is I want to take all the employees that are selected here and I want to bring them over to here, right here. And you see we're halfway done. But if we decide to do a new one, we can click Payroll Review, and it's going to bring in a brand new list and refresh that list automatically. And so that gives us the ability to refresh. And that's what I want to do. And keep in mind that we want to start each one off with this pending icon. And in the Wingdings font, if you look under home, this is the Wingdings font. That's the number 6. The number 6 is our Wingdings font. That is the pending. That's the little icon we're going to use. We've colored that orange. How is that colored orange? Well, we use conditional formatting for that. So we go into Home, Conditional Formatting, and Manage Rules. Let's take a look at the 2 conditional formattings we use for this font. And I decided not to use this one. This was an arrow, so we'll remove that. That was an arrow that showed you which one you were on. It was kind of cool, but I didn't really like it too much. Maybe we'll keep it. So I'll show you what that looks like in a second. In fact, let me just edit that row and you guys can decide if it's something you like. This is what I had originally, and it shows us which one we were on, but I decided not to go against it because it was just, so if it showed us which one we were on, which was kind of nice, it was like that one, but then when you select others, it was kind of off. So this was going to be the one that you're on. So that was kind of my idea with that, so you can let me know if you like that. But basically we have 2 current statuses right now, which is the pending and then the completed. So when we click Save and Next, it changes it to this green checkbox. And we can use conditional formatting to change the color. So back into that conditional formatting. And when we manage rules, we'll see that we have 3 rules. This one we're not really using, but we have green and orange. If we click on the edit, and all this does is if it's this U, which is the Wingdings font for that check marks, if it's that character, then make the font color green. And of course, if it's the 6, which is that pending, make the color orange. And that's pretty much it for that. We also have to know which one we are selected on. As you notice, the selected one is this blue color here. Now, how did we obtain that? Well, we've done that through conditional formattings, and B12 keeps an eye on a row. So if we select a row, we need to know what employee we're on, what row we're on. So we store that row in B12. So if you look here under B12, this is the employee review row, and that is in B12. So currently it's B10. And so to get this look, all we need to do is add some conditional formatting. In fact, I'm using 3 different three different conditional formats for this particular rows because it's kind of a fade out. It goes from darker to medium to light for that particular row. So I've used 3 conditional formatting. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. They're all based on this B12, this row number. So if that's the row number, it's going to color that and only that one. So when we look into conditional formattings and we take a look at these 3, you're going to see here. And then the first one is going to apply to AA9. Actually, we can use AA all. We can get rid of this. and make it all the way from 9 to, I believe 9 is the first one. Let's take a look at that. Yeah, 9 through 310, that's fine. Sometimes when we copy and paste, we get duplicates like that, so we want to keep it nice and clean. And we don't need AC11 for now that I'm aware of. And so that's good. Okay, so now we've got a nice clean line. I'll take a look at AC11. That's probably just from a copy and paste. So we've got 3 different rules. Here's the first one. This only applies to AA, right? So AA we want to fade out, and basically the rules are the same here in these two, and that is the fact that if B12 equals the row, then color it. Give it this fade out. It's going to go from darker to a little bit lighter, and that's going to apply to only column AA. This one, A, is going to apply to column B in the same exact rules. If B12 equals row, then color it light and give it a blue bold font, blue bold. Right? I've formatted this a little bit differently, bold and blue, as well as the fill color of being a light, because I want to give it that effect, and I want to match the border. I want to match the background of this, right? So it's background, and I also want to remove this border. So when we click here and go back into conditional formatting, you're going to see there's a rule that removes that border. So when we edit this rule and go into the format, you're going to go into borders, you're going to see that it's been removed. This border is not here, and that conditional formatting allows us to remove the border on that right side, specifically when B12 equals the row. So that's how we can signify which employee we have selected. So that's really handy. Okay, so now we've seen conditional formatting. Now how do we get this row to change? When we select it, how do we get that? We can use a simple selection change. When we select a cell in this particular range, what do I want to happen? I want the row that we've selected to appear right here into B12. So let's take a look at that back into the VBA. We can click on the payroll. This is based on a selection change. So we click on the payroll screen right here, and then we scroll down to selection change. We'll see here we want a few things to happen. Right here, actually, on AA9 to AC310, something happens. B11, right, and B12. So those are the two things that were happening. B12, we want the target row. I want the target row to show, and I also want the employee ID, which is located in column AB. I want that to be displayed in column B, in cell B11. That's really important because we need that employee ID, because that is going to tell us what information to load in. It's going to tell us what time clock information to load in. It's also going to tell us all the tax information to load in if we've saved specific taxes. Here you see there's 3 tax items. So we really need that ID number. So that ID number is going to go right here into B11. So we can use that when we run our advanced filters to pull the time clock data or pull anything else. So that's important. So the idea is this. If it's pending, I want to pull all the information. I want to pull the tax item information. This is the bug here. It says fuel reimbursement. I'll fix that bug. That is actually a federal local tax. And there's a bug that's causing it. So we have that there. And so you're going to see that go back. So we want this information from the employee's information, from the employee. Where is that? I want to pull it right from the employee information, and that is located in the employee manager. This is getting to be big. I want to pull it right from the payroll details and the tax information. I want to pull it right here. I want to pull that information right from here. And in fact, that's of course not the original location. It's actually located in a specific pay items list. And let's take a look at that just so we know where we are pulling it from. Payroll item list. It's going to be located here. So we're pulling that. So that employee ID is critical so that we know where to pull it from. We'll get into that in a little bit more details, but I wanted to just focus on reviewing. So when we select employee, we want that employee to load. So that's important. But before we get to that, there's one just small little bug. How do we load this list? So let's get back to there just so we can cover how we load this list real quick. So that is on the selection change right here. Payroll, selection sections, just this small macro here. That's all we're going to focus on right now. So the first thing we want to do is if M11 value equals empty, we need to check for no employees. And remember, the idea is all we need to do is take this information here and bring it over into this information right here. That's all I'm focused on doing right now. So in order to do that, I want to make sure that at least M11 must contain at least one employee, which would be here. So we want to make sure that that's not blank. If it's blank, there are no employees to move over. So we got to check that to make sure. So if M11 is empty, then we're going to provide the user with a message box saying, please make sure you have at least one employee to be paid list. Okay, and then we're going to exit the sub. We don't want to do anything. So as long as it's not blank, we can then figure out how to move over the list. So the first thing we want to do is determine the last row. This will help us the last row of the employees because we need to pull them all over or copy them all over, and we need to get the last row of the employees. So M is our column that holds our employee ID, so we're going to get the last row using this line. And then of course I want to clear out any employees that have been there already. I want to make sure that's cleared out so we can bring in a new list. So just in case there are any details in here, I want to clear out AA9 all the way through AC310. I want to clear that out. So we do that right here, AA9 through AC310. We're going to clear those out. All right, next up, I want to copy over the employees to be paid. So we can simply do that with one line of code. Employee AB9 through AC in the last row -2. Why is it -2? That's because our starting row is in a different place. Our starting row here, of course, is row 9, but where's our starting row in our list? Our starting row here is 11. So I need to make sure that we deduct 2 because our starting point, if it's 11 here, it should be 9 over there. So we need to subtract 2 from that. That's why we do that. So it's going to be the last row -2. Those values are going to equal M11 through N. That's going to copy over all of the employees to be paid using a value to value copy. So that's pretty set. And next thing up, I want to set the pending status for each employee. I need to set that pending. That's that icon that you saw right here. I want them all to be set to pending. As we review them, they'll be changed over to the green checkbox, but I want to make sure initially they are all set to pending. We're going to use that with a 6. Remember, that's a 6. So all I've got to do is create one line of code that says AA9 through AA and the last row -2 because our last row, for example, our last row here is 21, but our last row in the copy over is 23. So that's why we subtract 2. So we just got to bring that. We can do that with this. AA9 through AA and the employee last row -2 equals 6. So that's going to set all of the statuses to pending for each employee. And of course, the first employee to review is going to be 9, so I'd like to select that automatically. When we do that, the first row is going to be selected. So B12, we're going to set that automatically to 9, and we're going to set B11 to AB9. That's the first employee. So we're just going to set the first employee to be reviewed automatically as default. And that way, when we copy over the list, that first employee is going to be automatically set. That first employee's information is automatically going to be loaded in, and we're going to be ready to review that first employee. So we've set that up. We've set that up by bringing this ID AB9 over right to here, and for bringing the row 9, we're going to select that. That's for our conditional formatting. So that's also helpful as well. And of course, AM3 is going to be the date. I want to set the default. This is the pay date. We're going to create a payroll based on this date. And I want to know what the pay date, the date that we're actually paying our employees. We're going to set it to default. It's AM3, although the users may change that. And that's going to be right here. I've placed that right here, AM3. That is our pay date. Of course, we have a pop-up calendar, so we can change it to any date we want. But currently, it's going to default to the current date. And this is going to be the payroll date that's set for the actual payroll, because we always need that. And then we have the payroll that we've been selected. So that's going to help us signify which payroll is being used for this particular payroll. All right. Next up in the macro, we want to load the employee. I want to run the macro that loads all the employee information. We're going to go over that macro. It's going to load the time clock and all the information here from the employee information. It's going to load that. It's going to pull this information from the time clock data based, of course, on their employee ID and based on the start and end dates. And of course, we want to pull in all of the items, the employee pay items, which would, you'd see it went back to fuel reimbursement. I'll fix that error. No worries. But before you get it, that bug will be fixed. So we have here our taxes, we have here our deductions, we have here our payroll additions, and we have here our employee paid leave. So all that information has to come from somewhere. So it's going to come from a payroll item list. It's going to come all the way from here, and they're going to bring it in to there. So that's very, very important. So we're going to go over that. And back into the payroll, we'll take a look at it. So we've got all the information in employee review. And let's take a look at how we get that information when we select employee, how we get all of that to appear. So when we select either anywhere from AA9 through AC9 or any specific row with an employee, I want that macro to run. So let's go ahead and take a look and see how we get that macro to run on selection change. So we look under the payroll sheet, we have selection payroll. We have a selection of employees to review. If we make a selection from AA9 through AC3 and that's critical, AB and the target row do not equal empty, that means there's actually something in the row. In that case, we are going to run the macro. We went over these two, B11, of course, the employee to review, the employee there, and the ID, of course, the employee, this should set employee ID, we'll put that right here, ID, and we also, of course, have the row that we need for the conditional formatting, and now we're going to run a macro called payroll load employee to review. Payroll load employee. Let's take a look at that macro and see how we handle that. And we can right click here. And let's take a look at the payroll load employee review and see how we get to. And let's take a look at the payroll load employee review by right clicking and clicking the definition. We can pull that up. Of course, that's in our module payroll review employee max. And we've got a macro here that's going to pull all of that information. So let's go through that and see just how we did that. We're going to dimension the employee review row. We need to know what row we're reviewing. Of course, the employee review, and this gets a little bit tricky because there's two reasons. I've got to determine what status, and here is why. If it's been reviewed already, for example, save and next, I want to pull this information from any changes the user may have saved. It's going to pull it from a different table. For example, if we've added an amount onto a payroll additions and we click save and next, I want to pull that information back up. I want to pull those changes back up. But if though there are no changes, I'm going to pull it from the employee information. So there's two instances. One, has the employee been reviewed? If the employee has been reviewed, pull the data from a different list, and that's going to be called a payroll item list. Anytime we save, payroll list, I got two different lists. And that's going to be from the payroll item list. And this is the payroll. So we have a specific payroll ID. And so everything that gets saved in this payroll item list. So we're going to pull it back up from this list. However, if the employee has not been reviewed yet, it's going to pull it from this list, the default payroll items. This is the list that gets saved every time you make a change to the employee tax or employee reimbursement in the employee manager. So there's two specific lists. This one is defaults based on the employee information. So that means that when we go into employee manager here, anytime we make a change to this list or anytime we make a change to pay deductions, so if we add 50 onto this and we put this as weekly, that's going to get changed in our pay deductions in our employee. We went over that last time a little bit. That's going to get changed in our employee pay default items here. So it's going to get saved here. So we bring the information over to here before the employee is reviewed. After the employee is reviewed, we bring it from this list. This is the payroll item. Of course, a payroll ID gets assigned because I want to save it. There's different information. So that's very important. In our macro, we need to know, are we pulling it from has the employee been reviewed or not? If not, if it still has this pending, pull it from the default information. However, if it has been reviewed, pull that information from the payroll item list. So there's two different conditions. And we're going to go over each one of those inside the macro. So back into the VBA, we have our load review, and we're going to show you that. Now let's just take a look at that real quick just so we can see the difference. We're going to go scroll down right here. I'm going to go back. If AA in the review equals 6, then it's pending. Okay, then it's pending. Then we're going to do all of this. Else here previously saved, then we're going to do this. Let's bring this out a little bit so that we can see the the information here, right here. I'm going to bring this out so that when we show else, we can see those two differentials. Okay, so now we can clearly see the difference. So now let's go over this macro and see just how we did that. All right, inside, so we need the review row is long. The employee row, I need to know which row we're on. The last filter row, we'll focus on what those are in a minute. Employee ID, we need to know that, and the payroll ID. If this is a saved payroll, in other words, as soon as we save an employee, we get assigned a payroll number, a number for that specific payroll. We're going to have multiple payrolls, so we need to differentiate between multiple payrolls. That's very important. And of course, we're going to dimension the last time clock row because we're going to filter time clock, because I need to know. So I need to determine that. And of course, the last pay item row, I need to know that. We're going to filter pay items. So we're going to do all these filters. And of course, we have the pay item. We'll go over each one of these, but these are string, the employee pay row, and of course, the item type. We're going to stop the calculations. Of course, that turns off automatic calculations and screen updating. And that way we can load our employee information a lot faster. We've been over that. That's a macro that's basically, well, under the code reset, you can see those two macros. Stop calculation and reset calculation. Those are important for speed. So we've gone over those a few times already. Now, so back into the code. So with sheet 16, of course, sheet 16 is our payroll sheet. So we're focusing on that sheet primarily. First thing I want to do is I want to determine the employee row, and that's in B10. B10 determines our employee row. That is the row of our employee. We can look here to see how we went about getting that, and that's based on our employee ID. So if we look here at employee row, we're going to see using an index match here, just a match formula. B11 is, of course, our employee ID, and we're going to match it with employee ID, and then we're going to add 3. Why do we add 3? I need to know the employee row, and of course in the employee list here our first employee starts on 4. So if the match returns 1, the first item, then I need to make sure to get to row 4. So how do I get to row 4? I just add 3. That's why we've added 3. All right, so employee row is going to be important. I want to pull information from the employee, so I need to know the row of that employee. So that's going to be helpful moving forward. All right, next up, the employee ID. Of course, that's located in B11. We did go over that. The review row, that's the current row that we're reviewing. That's in B12. I showed you that. And of course, I want to clear all the fields of our payroll so that we can bring in the new information. We need to clear all that. We need to be sure we don't clear formulas such as this and this. And these will be locked down and protected in the future. So we want to clear our time clock information. We want to clear our tax item information. We want to clear deductions. We want to clear additions. And we want to clear our leave type. So all that information has to be cleared before we load the new employee data. So we can do that with just this line of code. In fact, there's two lines, both with clear contents. They both have the same function, but they're focused on different ranges. So we're going to make sure to clear all that information so that we can get ready for the new row. And next up, I wanted to determine the pay type of whether it's salary or hourly. That's very important. And that is going to be located in J8. J8, we were going to put it there. And what is it's sheet 2. That's our employee list. O is the column where we keep our pay types and employee row. Remember, I told you we're going to need that employee row because I need to pull the pay type. Are they salary or are they hourly? And I'll put that right here in AJ8. AJ8 or here. I want to put that pay type right here because that's really important because if they're hourly or salary, there's a lot of things that change here based on that. For example, if we select let's find a salary employee, here we go. A salary employee right here, a lot of things change based on that. So we use conditional formatting because we have 2 different types of formatting. So the first thing I want to know is what type of pay type, and I want to put that right here because when we select a salary employee, we have salary amount, salary frequency, and total salary. Whereas if we select an hourly employee, we have total regular hours, and total regular. So that's very different. And I'll show you how we did that through conditional formatting and some formulas, of course. And so that's important. So I want to put that right here. And of course, we pull that from the employee list. And of course, in column O is where we have our pay type. So remember, O and the employee row is going to get us that value. So we're going to put that right in AJ8. So we need that. All right, next up we're going to say if AJ equals salary, then I need to put in the frequency. I need to also pull the frequency, and I want to put that in AH10. And the frequency of that salary we store in column P of the employee list. Column P is where that's located, and so I want to pull that, and I want to put that right in AH10. Again, here's column P. Here's our salary frequency if it's a salary, and I want to put that right in here under, if it's a salary, right here, AH10. And only this is a salary. So we can use one cell for double duty. You'll look at this, you'll see that in a salaried employee, this particular cell, AH10, contains the frequency, because that's going to help us determine the total salary. Even if the salary is weekly, but we're paying them bi-weekly, we still need to calculate that. So that's important. However, in an hourly employee, AH is going to be our overtime rate. So we can actually use the same cell for both, and then we have some calculations based on whether they're an hourly or salary employee. Our formulas can help determine how we deal with that if it's an hourly or salary. So we can use the same cell for two different purposes, because no employee is going to be salary and hourly at the same time. So we can do that. So if it's a salary employee, I want to put that frequency right here. All right, next up we have that. So we've covered that. And now else, if it's an hourly employee, AH10 equals what? That's the overtime rate. We just showed you that, right? The overtime rate's located in column R of our employee list. So we can put that instead of our overtime rate. So for hourly employees, our overtime rate goes here. In this case, it's $30. So we can use that. So that's going to help determine it. And we can just simply, when we have those calculations, let's take a look at that. We can just say, if the employee type is hourly, then all we need to do is multiply AH10 by AF10. And that's just simply the overtime hours times the overtime rate. And then we're going to get that information. And then we can pull that up. And then, of course, we need to determine if the pay weeks and the pay frequency. However, so this is if it's hourly. However, what if it's salary? If it's salary, then I need to pull up the total salary. Let's take a look at that just so we're looking at a salary employee. This salary amount is $500 per week, but how much do we pay them if it's 20 days from November 1st to 11/20th? Well, we can figure that out using the from and start dates. Okay, so let's take a look at that formula. Here, if it's an overtime amount, right, for their hourly, but what if they're salary? If they're salary, this is the formula we are going to use. We can cover that right now. First of all, we want to multiply AH9. Why AH9? AH9 is, of course, is the amount of the salary. We're going to multiply that amount times, what are we going to index? We're going to index the pay weeks. Pay weeks, I'll go over that in just a moment. And the pay frequency divided by 52. That is the number of weeks in a year. So we're going to find the pay weeks. And let me just go ahead and go over that. We go into formulas, name manager, and then type in pay, and we can quickly find pay weeks right down here at the bottom. And we tab over to that, and we can see that our pay weeks are currently hidden, or they're right up here, 52, 26, 24, or 12. Those are based on the frequency. So if the salary is weekly, the pay weeks are going to be 52. If it's bi-weekly, 26. Semi-monthly, 24, of course, and monthly, 12. I want to get that salary to an annual basis. Once it's in an annual basis, I can then divide it by the number of days in the pay period, and that's going to get us our total salary for that specific pay period. So we're going to do that, and we're going to continue on with our formula. So the first thing we need to do is we need to match. We need to find that frequency. And so we need to know the number of weeks. We need to index the number of weeks, and we find using match where that frequency is, and we need to divide by 52. We're going to divide it by 52 so we know how many weeks. And then we're going to multiply that times the payroll end date minus the payroll start date divided by 7. Why do we divide it by 7? Because that's going to determine the number of weeks. So we have how much per weeks, and we have the number of weeks. Maybe it's 1.2, maybe it's 2.3. In this case, maybe it's 2.8 or whatever it is. So we need to multiply that. First, we get how much they're paid per week, how much they're paid per week by dividing by 52. Then we determine how much 1 week of pay is, how much of the determination, how many weeks is their pay period. It could be 2.3, so we multiply the amount times that, and we multiply the amount times all of that. Amount times the weeks times the day. That's going to give us our total salary amount. So that's how we calculate the salary amount. I know I went a little quick over that, but you can always download that and go through the formula yourself. But that's basically it. We determine the amount here. We break it down into weeks, and then we multiply it times a year, and then we figure out how many weeks this is, even if it's a decimal. And then we multiply that number of weeks by the weekly amount. And then we get our salary amount. All right, so let's move on through our macro now that we covered that. So now we know why we have both overtime for an hourly employee and we have salary. So we've covered that. And now let's add in the time clock data. And basically the idea is I want to take, just like we've done in the past with our time clock data, we have our time clock list here. And what I want to do is I want to run a specific advanced filter, and I want to put the employee ID here. And I want to put the clock in date, or the start date, or the end date in this case. And I want to put all that data down here. Let's take a look. Let's pull an employee up with data so we can see that and see what it looks like. And let's see if we can find an employee with it. All right, Angela's got 2 entries in there. So let's go ahead and look at the time clock list. And if we scroll over here, the payroll time clock results, I've got the results right here under the payroll time clock results. So we have just the results and the row. That's really all I want to extract. We use this for something else. And what about our criteria? Well, our criteria is right here. 11/1 through 11/20 and the employee ID. So that's our criteria. Starting the pay date, ending the pay date, and our employee ID. And now I'm going to put the results. We have other results that go here, but this is used for other areas of it. But for our payroll, I want the payroll results right here. I'm just going to extract because that's all I really want. Those 4 items plus the row. And I'm going to put those inside our macro. I'm going to put those right inside. Let's go back into the payroll screen. I'm going to put those 4 values right here. And I'm going to put the row, the last value, right here, and that's going to be hidden. The reason is I need this is because when I edit that, I need to know what row to edit. I need to know what row to pull that information. So that's going to help us. That row there is going to play out a very, very important part of that. So we need to pull that up. And so we'll just go ahead and look at that. So let's continue on with our macros. So we need to clear the contents of the employees so that we can get ready. So in sheet 9, which is of course our time clock sheet, we're going to clear all the advanced filters, any previous advanced filters or criteria. We're going to clear that out so we can get it ready. We're going to put the employee ID in AB3. I just showed you that. Z3 is going to be greater than the start date, and AD3 is going to be less than the end date. Let's just take a look at that real quick in the employee time clock list here. Going back over to the criteria, again, greater than Z3, greater than the start date, AD less than the end date, and of course the employee ID in AB3. So those components are important before we run our advanced filter. Of course, we also need to get the last row. I need to run it, so I need to know the last row. In this case, the last row is 40, so we need to pull that out before we run our advanced filter. All right, so moving on, we have that, and let's go back into the VBA. So we're getting all of our information ready for our advanced filter. The last time clock row, we need to get that. And now we're ready for our advanced filter. We're going to start off with the original data, and that's going to start in A4 through I in the last time clock row. We're going to run our advanced filter. We're going to copy it. We want to copy it over to a new area. And the criteria I just mentioned to you, we're just going to go from Z2 through AD3. That's going to be our criteria. Our greater than the start date, less than the end date, and our employee ID. We're going to copy it over to range AL4 through AP4, and we want unique. AL4 through AP4. That's where we're going to copy it over, and of course that's just this small range right here. AL4 through AP4. We're going to copy that. This way the data will appear right here as however many rows it is between that time period, because I want that displayed. And we just get those 4 columns plus the 5th row column. So that's going to display. The next thing up, I need to determine if there is data in this. So we're going to check for the last row. If the last row, of course, is less than 5, then we know there's no data. So we do need to run a check for that before we move forward after our advanced filter. And we can do that with here. First, we determine the last filter row using column AL 99 up, and then of course if the last filter is less than 5, we're going to go to no time clock. That's going to skip everything and go right down to here. All right, so next up we have sheet 9. We also want to sort it. I want to sort the data once I get it, because I want it to show from the earliest to the latest, or from, excuse me, actually from the latest to the earliest, descending. So that's going to be the most recent, I believe. Let's take a look at that just to make sure. 1113, the most recent to the least. You could do it the other way if you want. Either way, it's fine. So I said the most recent entry to the the oldest there, but you could do it the other way too. I guess I don't. Whichever way you prefer is fine. If you want to change it, you could just change this to ascending. Ascending would be change it, and then we would have. And let's go ahead and run that just so we see what that looks like. And we run that, and now we've got 12 to 13. So either way, both work just fine, whichever you like. Maybe we'll keep it ascending. All right, moving on. But we do want to sort it, and that's kind of nice and important. So we can look over the data very clearly, seeing the data in a kind of organized manner. And then what I want to do is I want to set the range with sheet 9. I'm going to set that range before we move it over. We're going to apply that sort based on AL5. AL5 is the start date and time of our advanced filtered results data. And that's, of course, located right here. AL5 is the first row of data. So that's what I'm going to base it on when I sort it. All right, next up, if the last filter is greater than 35, then it equals 35. I just set that as the maximum because I figured about 31 days is a full month of payroll. So I've set the maximum. If you look down here, I've set it to about 35 rows here. So we just wanted to set it up there. So we can say if it's 31 days is the maximum. So 31 days here, of course, in our results, in our time clock would be about 35 rows. So if we click all the way down to here, and about 31, right? So this would be row 35. Don't worry about this. This is just some edits. Nothing. This is part of our database. So when we make a change, it kind of looks funny, but we can, let's put a space there so we don't see that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag that space there so it doesn't bleed out into there. Okay, so now we don't need the formats on that. And then too many formats is probably not good, so we can clear that, no fill on that. Okay. Now that we have our data, we're ready to move on and bring all that data in. So let's go ahead and see how we did that. We'd start out by saying range AE14 through AH and the last filter row plus 9. Remember, we always want to add or deduct row based on the differentiation of the row numbers. And I'll go over that again. Our results row here start, of course, in row 5. But our payroll data, where we want to bring the data, starts in row 14. So there's a 9-digit difference. So we need to increase the rows. So it's 9 row difference there. So we need to increase it by 9. And of course, this on the payroll equals sheet 9. So this brings all the clock in and out data. And then, of course, the last column, AK14, I want to bring in the row numbers. I want to bring in those row numbers into AK column from AP. That's very important. We're going to need that. So that means here in AK, I'm going to put those row numbers. And of course, they come from right here, AP. So we need to bring that in as well. So we've got that covered, and now we've got that. Let's continue on with our macro, and this training is going to run a little bit longer, but what we'll do is we're going to finish it up next time. So we've got no time clock. Now, when we add in the taxes and other deductions and other additions, we also want to bring in information. So I need to know, here's where we need to know, is it pending or is it previously saved? If it's pending, do this. If it's previously saved, do this. So let's go over if it's pending. If it's pending, I need to bring all of the information over from some of the pay item, default pay item list. So that's really important. In sheet 17, first of all, we're going to focus on sheet 17. And sheet 17, of course, is our employee pay default items. That's where we're going to be pulling the information from. Let's take a look at that. Employee default. This is our store where we store our tax information, our pay deductions, our pay additions. This is where we store every time we make a change to one of these particular fields in our employee manager, whether we make a deduction change, whether we make a addition change, or whether we make a tax change. That information is all being stored in our pay defaults list. And it is that same information that I want to bring over into the payroll. So we need to start out with the data in that list. So we're going to focus on our employee pay defaults. I want to bring it over. So what I want to do is, again, I want to run an advanced filter, and I want to run it for the employee ID here. So I want to bring it over, so I need to run that advanced filter and bring in all the data here. So let's go ahead and find an employee that has data, and we'll run that advanced filter. This employee doesn't have. Okay, this employee has some information. So when we look back into the employee defaults, we will see 102. Oh, that employee's been saved already, so that's going to pull it up from a different list. Let's go ahead and set that employee back to default. So by going to here, and then what we're going to do is we're going to run this again. Okay, so now we have it pending status, now our information, and now when we look in the payroll defaults, we're going to see the employee ID. And the reason is, remember, we're pulling information from two different spots. If it's been reviewed already, it's not going to pull it from this table. But now this employee has not been saved, so we are going to pull the information from here. Put the employee ID and get all of the information, regardless, is it a tax, is it a pay deduction, or is it a pay addition? I want all the information right here so that I can bring that into. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a for next loop. I'm going to start here, and I go all the way down, and based on the type here, I'm going to put it in specific places. And I'm also going to put it in specific rows based on the employee manager row so that they're in order. And of course, I need to know the database row. So let's continue on with our macro. We have so we're going to clear the contents of sheet 17. Again, just like we clear the contents of our advanced filter. I want to make sure that starting here at M2 all the way, I want to clear all that information out so that I can get ready for the next. And then the next step, I want to put that employee right here in M2, that ID that's going to help us with our advanced filter. Sheet 17 M2 equals the employee ID. That will be used for our advanced filter. Again, I need to get the last row of the sheet 17, the last row of data, so we can run our advanced filter in column A. We're running our advanced filter just like we do always, with the row of the data, including the header rows and the last pay, advanced filter, filter copy. We're going to copy that. What's our criteria? Our criteria is just M1 through M2, which is only the employee ID. That's the only criteria that I have, employee ID. And I want all of those results returned right here between O1 and W1. I want all those results right here, O1, W1. And so that all the results will be here. And then, of course, I need to determine the last row of the filtered row. In this case, it's 11. But, of course, if it's less than 2, then we return no data. So we determine that last row just as we do with all advanced filters. The last filter row equals O and L X up. And, of course, if the last filter is less than 2, go to no pay item, which will skip it and go right down here. All right, next up. Item type. We need to determine what is the item type. Of course, that's going to be stored in P, but I need to know based on the item type, it's going to go in different areas. If it's a tax deduction, it's going to go right here. If it's a payroll addition, it's going to go here. If it's a payroll deduction, it's going to go here. If it's a paid leave, it's going to go here. So we need to determine all that. In fact, paid leaves are actually on a different list because they are completely different. So we'll show you that in just a moment. And next up, we have so we're going to determine our employee type. Employee pay row, I need to know that as well. The employee pay row is going to be sheet 17V. That's the row in which we saved that. Because what I want to do is, let's take a look at this. This is the row it was saved in the employee information. Look at this, 93, 94, 95. That is the information that's been saved here under the employee manager. Right? So 93, 94, 95, that's the row. I've saved the row here so that when we bring it back, we know what row to put it on. But that row is also going to help us to load it in the employee manager. So for example, If it's row 93 here in payroll, it's going to be a specific row. Also, just a different row. In payroll, it's going to be right here, 14. So all I really need to do is subtract 89 from that and to figure out what the row is. So we can do that just with our line of code. So we need the employee payroll, and that's, of course, stored in column V. The column V is our filtered results list, which we can find right here, V. So 93, so we need to, I want that row as well. So that's very important. It's going to help us place it in the employee. So we need to get that. Now we can say if the employee type is deduction, 79, I said 89. Okay, minus 79. So if the employee is tax deduction, then AL, that's our tax name, an employee payroll minus 79, right? We're minusing 79 once again. Let's just go over that because I gave it to you wrong information. If it's 93, right, but I need it in 14, I'm going to subtract 79. Why is it 93? Well, it's 93 because we saved it in the employee manager right here under 93. So I want these in the same exact order. So to do that, we just get the row number. That makes sure everything's exactly the same order that they were entered here. So it's not confusing for the user. So we use that in our payroll screen so that way we can get everything also here in the same order. So 93 equals 14, 94 equals 15, 95 equals 16, simply subtracting 79. So we do that right here. And this is commented out. We're not going to use these. I can get rid of those. Our calculations are going to be automatic, and I've done that, so we can remove that. Again, we don't need that as well. Our calculations are automated, and I've automated those, and we're going to show you those calculations probably next time. Okay, so if it's a pay deduction, again, we're subtracting a specific row and we're putting it in AP, the column AP. And of course, I want the amount. So for pay deductions, I need the item name and the amount. So that's going to go right here. Pay deductions would be AP, the item name, and the amount. Everything else is calculated. So we have that here. Again, if it is a pay deduction or pay addition, AL, I guess we need the amount here too. How'd that happen? Okay, so we'll put that amount. That's kind of important. ALAM. Okay, so we need the amount. That's important. 99 in this case equals, and then in this case, so it's going to be the amount. So we need that. Pay additions, pay deductions. We need the amounts there. So that's important. And so we just subtract from the rows, so that's good. So we've got that covered. And now what we can do, so it brings all that information from it based on the item type, whether it's tax deduction, pay deduction, or pay additions. Employee leaves is on sheet 11. Employee leaves on sheet 11. That's a different sheet because it's kind of a different type of database. We've got all sorts of information. So employee leave, we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to run a different filter. So let's take a look at that. Employee leave, which is employee leave list, is here. So I'm going to take this, also run it, except I need to know if it's paid or not paid. I'm only focused on paid leave, right? We only want to focus on paid leave. If it's non-paid leave, we're not going to focus on that on payroll. We're only focused on paid leave because we might pay them for it. So that's what we want to do. So I only want to focus, 1, on the employee ID and 2, on paid leave because we have the ability to have it paid or non-paid. So that's it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to filter and get our results here. We also have the row, and we're going to put that right in the leave here and paid. And we also want the annual allowance. So we can do that by putting that in our payroll right here. So we can do that and continue on here. No leave. Else, previously saved. So here, right, starting here, add in employee leave. We're going to determine the last leave row as long. We need to run an advanced filter, but first we want to clear any previous results just like we did. We're going to put in the employee ID in AA3 and, of course, the paid because I only want paid employees. And, of course, we're going to get the last leave row and run our advanced filter just as we did using the criteria in AA2 and AB3. I just showed you that criteria. The results, of course, are going to go in AA4 through AE4. All right, now we're going to get the last filtered row. If the last filtered row is less than 5, go to no leave. If as long as there is data, no leave, of course, would skip it and go right here. But assuming there is data, we're going to bring in that data and then, of course, using the last filter row plus 24 and bring in that data, the leave name and allowed leave hours. So I want to bring that information right here. All right, so that's how we cover leave, and that's how it's brought in. All right, next up, next week, we're going to go over else and a lot more. We're out of time this week. We've gone way over. But next week, we'll catch up. We're going to go into previously saved where we have a whole different database. All right, thank you so much for joining me. We have a lot to cover, a whole lot to cover this New Year's weekend. So thank you for joining me. Thank you for spending your holidays with me. And I look forward to bringing you many more. So please share, please like. And of course, if you do that, please check out the dashboard course. It will skyrocket your Excel skills and career. So I appreciate if you check that out. I'll put the links down in the description there, as well as for the download the workbook as well. Thank you so much for joining me.